What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So before I jump into this video, I wanted to go ahead and just make sure that this is not misconstrued as something that is an off-the-cuff criticism that doesn't have any merits to it. It's more of an observation, and so far having conversations with community members, making multiple videos over Gotham Knights, I feel like it's something that we probably have to come to terms with and discuss, and hopefully it's a mistake, or at least I would say a strategy that has to be considered carefully if a team like Warner Brothers Games Montreal is going to make a future game in their own right. Now, this is the core story surrounding Gotham Knights. Now, one really big thing regarding Gotham Knights was the very first time that we actually saw it, the very first name that we heard, one of the very first characters that we saw was actually Batman, Bruce Wayne himself. Gotham Knights opened up introducing us that this game was going to be in the world of Batman, but they introduced the game in a way that said that Batman was more than likely not going to be in a picture. Now keep in mind that this would have been maybe fine and dandy were it not for the way that it was released and some of the circumstances that actually did surround this, which I'll take my time to explain in this video. The very first circumstance surrounding this reveal with Batman was one that he had possibly been killed in an explosion somewhere that had happened in town. Now, if you look very closely at the last game that actually had anything to do with Batman, he faked his own death in an explosion as well. Now we have to be really candid. The explosion that they referred to in the Gotham Knights reveal did not seem to match the location of, say, what happened in Batman Arkham Knight. If you look at the Nightfall Protocol, that was specifically concocted for the Wayne Manor mansion. But in Gotham Knights, it seemed like it had happened somewhere else. And maybe Batman specifically and purposefully had to collapse maybe the Batcave and even the Wayne Manor. But my argument here too is even though they probably were trying to match the comic in a unique way, where if you look at the Court of Owl's writing, Batman was thought to be dead and they were probably trying to match that in Gotham Knights, I don't necessarily think that it was fair that they would do something that was so similar, or in a sense, what I call a chimeric representation of Batman's own death in terms of how he died. Because if you go back to, say, the Nightfall Protocol, there was an explosion, and I think this probably confused a lot of fans off the bat. So in making a new game, I think one lesson that Warner Brothers Games Montreal can really learn is to maybe be clear in the way they present their character or characters. I feel like the reveal of Gotham Knights would have done well if they didn't have to portray Bruce Wayne as dead. I feel like if they were coming from the perspective of, say, the comics and the fans already knowing the lore and the story, it would have really made a big difference if they had said, hey, the Gotham Knights are in a position where they have to go look for Bruce Wayne in regard to what happened to him. This would have been a much more stronger premise, because now the one sliver that a lot of people are looking for in a game that surrounds Batman would actually be one that is apparently there, which is Batman. Think about it. If you go back and listen to even the developers, they understand that they're making this game in the Batman universe. And a game in the Batman universe without Batman really leaves a lot of questions that are being asked, or at least provides a little bit of uncertainty for people who may want to come into it. This is not saying that they should not take time to make a new game. Don't get me wrong, or pursue something else. But if you're going to pursue something else, you might want to make that thing that you're pursuing very distinctive in its own right. Look at Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is pursuing an entirely new IP, following something that is not necessarily tied to or related to anything that Wonder Woman has been represented in the past. I mean, many people might go ahead and say, but Wonder Woman, well, calm down. If you look at Injustice 1 and Injustice 2, she's a very central character in both games. But yet, the developers did not in any way refer to any kind of thing that would have been similar to the roles that she had played in the Injustice games. If they had done that and then went ahead to maybe concoct another story, I guarantee you people would accuse them of it being a bait and switch. But they instead decided to focus on the character and focus on other narratives and lore aspects that are relating to her. So I believe strongly that the developers really did go this direction to try to create some kind of a bait and switch or something that is a hook, but I think it may have somewhat backfired because it didn't necessarily seem to create the effect that it was intended to. In fact, if you even want to go ahead and say, but you didn't think anybody was quite confused, a content creator in this space actually has a very popular video that they made explaining why Gotham Knights was not anything related to the Arkham games, because almost everyone thought that this game had some kind of Arkham connection because of that very first opening that we got to see. An argument that I believe that, if considered, would probably help to showcase this entire thing in a better light is the fact that the source material seemed to have been heavily altered. Now, there is modification of source material when it comes to maybe video games, or maybe when it comes to movies, when you're taking something from a very core canonical piece of literature, and that is, say, the Court of Owls. But the centrality of the Court of Owls is actually heavy on not just Batman, but on Nightwing. So if you go back and look at the 52 comics, I think the new 52 comics, where the Court of Owls were somewhat introduced, written about, and expanded upon, you're going to see that they are a very interesting group of people, and they actually are focused on Batman, but they have a very strong relationship with Dick Grayson and his own family line. Now, yes, this has also been somewhat modified in Batman and Robin, the animated TV show, where they actually use Damian Wayne in that right. But still, Damian Wayne exists in this new 52 comics, so they, in my opinion, I estimate them as having been a modification of the source material rather than a heavy alteration of what the original author had written. I mean, you already see it with the switch of Robin to Tim Drake rather than Damian Wayne in this game, and so that already in its own self is kind of questionable. And then what's even interesting is you have Batgirl as a central figure in this particular game. In reality, in the 52 comics, I don't necessarily think you see Batgirl playing a central role. Yes, she is there, but it doesn't necessarily seem like the story is focused on her as a knight. I would argue that the Gotham Knights game should probably have been a Nightwing game, even if they wanted to make something that was quite unique and different. And that would have probably been a much more solid foundation for actually presenting this game to the audience. So the source material, the way things have been written, the canon is very important, especially when it comes to using it in other forms of media. Even if there's a modification that needs to happen, it needs to be done in a very intelligible way and in a way that sets it apart. Because I just recently beat Arkham Knight at 240%, where you actually get the real Nightfall protocol. And I remember Batman just walking into the building and the building exploding. I mean, it did explode twice, because on New Game Plus, you can do the first, Nightfall protocol, and then you can finish all of the Riddler challenges and all of the most wanted missions, which is all the enemies and side missions. And then you can go back for the Nightfall protocol again, which I watched twice in the space of a few days. And I just could not help thinking to myself, now why would Gotham Knights want to do something like that when they had a very interesting core story that was already available to them? So in the future, I believe that the developers have a lot to be able to take from and learn from. And here's another really important thing. The killing of Batman, in my opinion, really did shoot them in the foot when it comes to this particular game. If you even think about the first adaptation from the Court of Owls into an animated series, which is a Batman vs. Robin TV show, they never thought to insinuate that Batman was going to be dead, or even try to think that, because he is such a central figure in his own universe that it's very weird to have a gravestone with his name in a game which the premise is actually quite centered around him and one of the knights, and to just have it be a game that has all of the knights in some kind of an interesting premise where we don't necessarily know what they're doing. Now, the truth is, of everything that I've said, it could be that Batman is actually alive and they've just decided to write the story in a way that has that cliffhanger. But this video is actually here to argue that the original presentation could have benefited if done differently. This is not to argue that Batman should be in the game. So I know I'm probably going to hear comments from people who probably didn't watch this video to the end, but this is probably one of those things that I like to do to stir up a little bit of, emotions, and then eventually leave the timestamp for them. But either way, let's have some conversation in the comment section, because I think the developers could really learn from this particular piece, because marketing can do as much as marketing can do, But I think, again, narrative is a very strong way to convey your game or convey your story to an audience. And the way that you do it is very important to how your game is perceived. Thank you very much for watching the video. I really appreciate you guys' time and audience. Take some time to comment, like I said, and hopefully we'll talk very soon in another video. Peace out.